Hi, and welcome to the basic course in C programming. My name is Niilo Heinonen, and in this tutorial we will be going over how to download course templates, how to open the VSCode workspace from those templates, how to write, compile, run and debug your programs, and how to submit your programs to A+ for grading. This tutorial expects that you have completed the previous section, so that you have your programming environment and VSCode extensions installed. In this tutorial, I will be using Ubuntu through WSL, but you can follow along even if you're using macOS, straight Linux, MingW, etc., because almost everything will be identical. If I'm doing anything that's only WSL related, I will inform you of that. So, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is open our terminal. When we have our terminal open, we'll write mkdir, which stands for make directory, and I will call it C course. I'll then write cd, which stands for change directory, so I will change my directory to the one I just created. I will then write ls, which will list everything inside this directory, and obviously it's empty. So let's download our first module by writing wget no-check certificate and then opening A+. Each module has its own template, and links to them can be found before the exercises. So here we will just press copy link and paste it after our wget command. Once we hit enter, we can see that it downloaded, and we can check this by writing ls again. Great, now we see that we have a module1.zip file in our directory. Let's unzip this by writing unzip module1.zip and writing ls again. Now we have a new directory called module1. So let's move into that by writing cd module1. We can then write ls again to see that we have a file called module1.code workspace. And from this file we can open VSCode by writing code, space and name of the file. Then we hit enter and VSCode should open. Perfect. Let's then go over the basics of VSCode. So the first thing we always check is top center. We make sure that it reads workspace. If it doesn't, it means that we have only opened the directory these files are in and not the actual workspace file. So we have to try again. If you're using WSL like I am here, the next thing we should always check is in the bottom left corner that it reads WSL. If it doesn't, click on that corner and choose Reopen folder in Ubuntu. Now that the checks are out of the way, let's get into the actual VS Code. Let's look at the tab in the bottom center. We have 4 sections there, the first one being problems. It will show us if the VS Code realizes that we have some errors already in our code. The second one is output, and it will show us information after we try to compile our program. Next up is debug console, which will show us information when we are debugging our program. And lastly, we have our terminal, where all the program output will be printed. Let's then take a look at the side tab. Here the 2 most important sections are Explorer and Run and Debug. It's also good to double check on your extensions section that you have your C and C++ extensions installed, and if you are on WSL, make sure that they are installed on Ubuntu and not only on Windows. Okay, let's go to the Explorer section, and we see that we have a directory called first task, and under it are 2 directories, VSCode and src or source. In this course, we only ever want to modify the files inside the source folder, so let's open that. The file we are modifying in the first task is the main.c. Let's open that, and we can see it pop up in the main view. At the moment the code does nothing, but let's still try to run it. We will open the run and debug section and then the drop-down list that can be found next to the play button. Here we're going to choose which task we want to build and run. And obviously right now we only have one choice, the first task. If you're using macOS, you choose LLDB, and if you're using anything else, like Ubuntu that I am, I choose GDB. Once we have the correct one selected, let's press the green play button, which will compile and run our program. Great, it compiled and ran without issues. So let's try to make it do something.
80 minutes later.
Right, so here's a little program I made. Let's try to run this one. Oh no, something went wrong. Unfortunately, I'm not Dora the Explorer.
Do you see a hole?
So, even though you might be screaming at your screen, I don't know what's wrong with my code, so I have to debug it. I will start by adding a breakpoint on line number 5. I do this by clicking a little red dot next to the line number. Next, I will build and run the program again by pressing the same green arrow. This time the program won't run to the end, and instead it will stop on the line that I chose. So on line number 5, the program execution will stop. We get a new set of buttons to the top center. And going from left to right, the first one is continue. It will run the program to the end, or until it hits the next breakpoint. Next is step over. This will go one line at a time, so we can easily move through our code and see what went wrong. Then there are the step in and step out buttons. They will allow us to see the details of function calls. So if on one line of code you have multiple function calls, you can step into them and view each individually. Lastly, there are the self-explanatory restart and stop buttons. Here I'm stepping over until I hit the return statement of this function. Let's now take a look at the sidebar. Here we can see our variables and our call stack, so we can see what functions are currently executing and what values different variables are currently holding. In our example, we can see that the variable called important number is currently holding the value 0. I now realize that my code isn't working because important number is 0 and not 1. I'll fix this error and try to run the code again. Okay, let's start stepping over again and see if our code works this time. If we look at the top left corner, we can see how the value of the important number changes as we are stepping over the line that sets the value to +1. Great, our code works and we now know how to debug programs in VSCode. So, the last step is submitting this source code to A+, so we'll get it graded and maybe get some points from it. The easiest way to do this is right-clicking on the file that we want to submit, in this case main.c, and choosing Reveal in Explorer. This will open an Explorer view for us, and from here we can just drag and drop it into A+. Now all we have to do is click submit and the grader will do the rest.